Good morning and welcome to Capital Group. I would love to thank you for joining this Diversity Project hybrid event hosted by the Disability Workstream of the Diversity Project. I'm going to introduce myself and Capital Group, the firm that I work for, and then take you through the plans for today. My name is Alexandra Haggard, and I am absolutely delighted to be hosting today's event. And there are 4 reasons I'm really excited about this. The first one is that I am a co-founder of the Diversity Project. And the Diversity Project is a cross-company initiative that champions a truly diverse, equitable, and inclusive UK investment industry. We now have over 100 members, representing over $14 trillion in assets, pounds, I should say, and we represent over 70,000 employees across the industry. And we are a force for change. My second role here today is as a co-lead of the Disability Workstream, and I'm also here to encourage and support more companies to become disability confident. The third reason I'm here is that I am a leader at Capital Group, and I'm a member of their Europe and Asia Management Committee, and Capital is deeply committed to diversity and inclusion. And the fourth reason is the one that is the most personal to me. You will probably know that today is World Mental Health Day. I have depression and anxiety. I was diagnosed over 10 years ago, and that means that I have a disability. And I am enormously grateful to both Capital Group and to the Diversity Project for the opportunity to take that disability and turn it into an opportunity to help drive progress, both in my firm and in the industry. So why are we supporting this initiative, and what does it mean at Capital Group? The starting point for us at Capital is that we want our associates to feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to work and all of the aspects that that brings, including disability. As a successful global asset management firm who's been investing for clients for over 90 years, we know that our differences actually make us better. Our clients' portfolios are actually managed by multiple people. There is no single star manager. We are built through diverse teams bringing different points of view together, and their ideas help our investors reach their long-term goals. And as a senior leader at Capital, I embrace and hold myself accountable for nurturing a culture of belonging, where associates are encouraged to embrace their authenticity. And advancing these goals is something that I feel personally really accountable for. And there are lots of different ways that we are advancing these goals at Capital. One of the examples is that every single one of our 9,000 associates at Capital actually has a DE&I goal built in to their annual goal setting. Another one is our really rich group of 23 Capital communities. These are resource groups that represent our very rich diversity of identities and interests, including race and ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, faith, mental health, and more. And really importantly today, we have the Capital Abilities Network with us, which is one of these. It's run by associates and aims to empower individuals who have both visible and invisible disabilities by providing resources and support. The community looks to drive more acceptance and inclusion for colleagues and associates while creating more awareness. And I'm delighted that 2 of my CAN colleagues are here today in the room. And then the last example I want to mention of advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion at Capital is the range of really broad benefits that we have and wellness programs to support people with varying needs. So for example, we support early career team members, associates caring for aged loved ones, single parents, LGBTQ+ communities. The range is really quite extensive. And we regularly update our HR policies, including recently adding specific language in reference to disabilities, specifically with an express commitment to workplace adjustments, just as one example. And these programs will continue to develop and help us evolve. Today, in relation specifically to Disability Confident, we are a level 2 employer, and we are very much looking forward to moving to becoming a disability leader and at that 3rd level. So on to the plans for today. We are absolutely delighted to welcome Minister Tom Pursglove, Minister of State for Disabled People, Health and Work, who's going to be in conversation with Beth Hume Holland, who is the CEO of Patchwork Hub. We'll then have a panel conversation hosted by Kerry Amies in conversation with a number of industry and diversity experts who are going to discuss the practicalities of becoming a disability confident employer. And the panel is also going to highlight the intersectionality of the disability topic with others, including mental health, neurodiversity, smart working, and others. So a few housekeeping points. We'd really like to encourage you all to participate and ask questions, including online. And especially those of you who've joined us virtually. For Q&As within the room, the microphone's going to be passed around. And in online, there's a Q&A function. For those in the room, again, we're going to be serving a light lunch afterwards with a lot of networking. So please do stay and chat to some of the representatives from the diversity groups who are here. And then the final bit, which is important, is that the bathrooms are just outside and are accessible. And in case of an emergency, again, if we need to vacate the building, we'll be going out that direction. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. Capital is incredibly proud to be able to support this event. And on that note, I am going to hand over to Beth Kuhn-Holland, who is the CEO of Patchwork Hub.
Thanks so much, Alex. And hopefully my mic is working and you can all hear me okay. So I'm really excited to be here with you today, and a warm welcome to the many member firms who couldn't be here in person but are joining us virtually. Before I get going, just as a brief visual description of myself, I'm a white woman, young-ish, with long brown curly hair and a fringe, and today I'm wearing a black and white dress and pronouns are she, hers. I'm delighted that I will be joined shortly on stage by Minister of State for Disabled People, Health and Work, Tom Pursglove MP, to talk about such an important topic. Before we start, I wanted to briefly introduce myself and my work, and to get everyone on the same page by outlining what the Disability Confidence Scheme is and why all employers should be striving to improve their approach to disability inclusion. And just for full disclosure, given this is an event all about accessibility in the workplace, as part of my disability, I have a cognitive impairment that can mean sometimes my words come out jumbled, or I take a couple of seconds to process things. So if this happens at all here, please just bear with me. True disability inclusion in action. So I'm Beth Kuhn-Holland, founder and CEO of Patchwork Hub, a disabled-led employment platform and consultancy. We support employers at every stage of their disability inclusion journey, whether through our training sessions, consultancy services, or our jobs board and more bespoke recruitment work. And we're really proud to be an official partner of the Diversity Project and Disability Confident Leader ourselves. I started Patchwork Hub because of my own experiences of living and working with a disability. From my experiences, including in the financial services sector, I discovered firsthand just how many unnecessary barriers exist in the world of work for disabled people. While from my disability advocacy work, I continue to be blown away every day by the sheer weight of talent in the disabled community that far too many employers are missing out on. Part of the work I do with Patchwork Hub is helping employers who are genuinely committed to improving disability inclusion but aren't sure how to authentically take action. And that's where something like the government's Disability Confidence Scheme can be so impactful. So, what is the Disability Confidence Scheme in a nutshell? It's a government initiative aiming to help employers to improve their approaches to disability inclusion across attraction, recruitment and retention of talented disabled employees. The scheme is divided into 3 levels that allow employers to progress and improve as they move along their disability confident journey. Level 1 is Disability Confident Committed. This first stage simply requires employers to sign up to a series of commitments and then take at least one concrete action from a list on the government website. Building on this, level 2 is Disability Confident Employer. This second stage requires the employer to fill in a self-assessment and evidence template and inform the government of the actions you intend to take to achieve your goals. And finally, there's level 3, where employees become disability confident leaders. To achieve this, your self-assessment and evidence of the core actions taken at level 2 must be validated by a third party, and you should have reporting in place, and you must be employing disabled people in your organisation. So this scheme takes you on a journey through these levels, and you need to have achieved one level before moving on to the next. By progressing through, you first make that commitment to inclusion and build a tangible plan of action, and by the end have a validated record that you've achieved a key set of goals around disability inclusion. The Minister will also shortly talk us through some of the benefits of the scheme, but truly when employers authentically engage with it, it can ensure tangible changes are made around practice and that disability inclusion is a core part of D&I agendas. It also supports accountability and gives some structure to activities where people often don't know where to start. And of course, it's a powerful signal internally to staff and externally to prospective employees, partners, and the world at large that you're committed to doing something to break down the systemic barriers in the way we do things in the workplace that exclude and constrain so many talented disabled employees. Then finally, just a bit of the wider picture of context to set the scene for the discussion we're about to have, and why tackling inaccessibility in the workplace is so important for society, for individuals, and for businesses. For society, in the UK, the disability employment gap is around 29%. In other words, the employment rate for disabled people is a full 29% lower than for non-disabled people. And it's not just having a job. Once in work, there's rising acknowledgement of barriers that lead to lower promotion rates for disabled people and lower average salaries. A disability pay gap that we often can't even measure if data isn't being properly collected and analysed. And as an employer, it's not just about disabled staff you may recruit. It's important to remember that 83% of disabled people aren't born with disabilities, but acquire them during their working life. And employers need to have the knowledge and the setup to put adjustments in place to support these employees. Now, making these adjustments is something that can worry employers, but in reality, many are really easy to implement. In fact, research found that 73% of employers who made work-related adjustments for employees said it was very or quite easy to do so. Costs are often low or even free, and there's also more bespoke support and resources available from the government's Access to Work scheme, which we'll talk about with the Minister. And as Alex mentioned, alongside the spending power of disabled people and their families, I think it's really crucial to acknowledge the diversity of thought and the unique skill sets that disabled people bring to workplaces. Every day, disabled people navigate a world which is not necessarily built with us in mind, and because of this, as well as the more conventional skills and qualifications, we also have a whole host of additional experience and skills, be that problem solving and resilience, through to heightened empathy and commitment to getting the job done. And ultimately, I really believe that a more inclusive and accessible workplace is vital for some, but ultimately benefits everyone who works there. Studies have repeatedly shown that disability-inclusive companies tend to outperform their peers across almost every key metric. So, hopefully that whistle-stop tour has outlined what the Disability Confidence Scheme is, but also why disability inclusion is such a vital thing for companies to prioritise and drive forward. This is such an important topic, and to explore it more fully, I'm delighted that we're joined today by the Minister of State for Disabled People, Health and Work, Tom Pursglove MP. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome to the stage. So first thing first, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to speak with me today. So the plan is we'll chat for around 15 to 20 minutes, and then if there's time at the end, we want to open up to questions from the audience, both those who are in person and also to hear from a couple virtually. So before we get going, could I just ask you to give a visual description of yourself for anyone with low vision?
Yes, so I'm Tom Pursglove MP. I'm the Minister for Disabled People, Health and Work. I'm 5'10". I have brown hair, blue eyes. And I'm today wearing a electric blue, I think it is, suit with a pink shirt and a burgundy tie.
Great, thank you. And I guess first off, obviously we were speaking about the case for action. Could you tell us a bit about why we need the Disability Confidence Scheme? Why do you think it's important?
So I think you did a brilliant elevator pitch actually for disability confidence in your opening remarks. But could I definitely want to, talk about that issue, but can I just start by thanking the Diversity Project for putting this event on, and obviously Capital Group for hosting us today, and for all of you who are here in person, but everybody who's joining us virtually, because this is such an important agenda and something that I care passionately about and all of you care passionately about, and something that government and actually I think society as a whole cares really passionately about. And so coming together to talk about what more we can do to support disability employment is absolutely crucial. I think it's very timely on World Mental Health Day that we're having these conversations as well. And when you look at the impact that Disability Confident has made over the years since it was introduced in 2016, it is very considerable. The fact that over 18,000 employers are now signed up as being disability confident, the fact that those businesses account for over 11 million employees on their payrolls, this has had very significant reach. But the bottom line here is that there is more to do. We've still got a considerable distance to travel. One of the big advantages of being able to move forward with the National Disability Strategy in recent months is that we've been able to begin to have conversations again. We acted entirely in accordance with the court judgment prior to the sort of blockers on the National Disability Strategy coming off. But one of the things that I was hearing consistently was people saying we need to have the Disability Confident Review because we need to take this to the next level. We need to capture all of the learning that there's been. There's probably more that we need to do, particularly around SMEs, to try and encourage more of them to become disability confident. And the fact that we're now able to get on and do that work, I think is really welcome. And all of you would be keen to hear your views as we seek to move that forward. But the reason that this is so important, the reason that this scheme matters, is because of everything that it does to help bridge the gap that there is. All of the research that I see demonstrates that often the biggest single barrier to disability employment and people facilitating those opportunities within their workplaces is often just knowing what to do. It is actually knowing what good looks like. And I think on the course of this discussion, we will touch on that in various different aspects, I'm sure. But often, a lot of this comes down to knowing what good looks like, knowing what practical steps you can take to try and unlock those opportunities. And for me, it isn't just about job starts. I get a little bit frustrated when you see in the media all of the sort of constant conversation and debate around job starts. That cause is really important, and it's something that actually I think we can be really proud of as a country when you consider that we've got 1 million more disabled people in work. We set that employment target and that employment goal for disabled people. We met it 5 years earlier, and we'll now revise our plans and work out where we go from here in terms of building on that progress, and Disability Confident will be an important part of that. But the retention piece is also equally as important. So job starts and retention have to be seen as all part of the same debate, I would argue. I think Disability Confident really speaks to that because it's about not only having those inclusive employment practices and making sure that we support more disabled people into work, it's also about understanding as an employer what you can do to have that deep commitment to making sure that those employees have really successful roles with you, making sure that there are opportunities to progress. And I think, as I say, as we seek to move on from that earlier employment goal, building on those successes, Disability Confident will have a really important role to play. Because in the end, the bottom line here is that government can't do all of this on its own. We can be a driver for change. I would argue government has been a driver for change, but it also, in order to achieve what we all want to achieve, it needs employers to work together, it needs disabled people to work with us, it needs their representative bodies to work with us as well. And actually the model respects the fact that we recognise the social model in this country, and Disability Confident is a good example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and definitely the social model, for anyone who's not familiar with the social model of disability, it's that idea where disabled people are the barriers that are faced by, are barriers put up by society versus the medical model where it views disabled people more as a problem. So it's great to see that. And yeah, I think in terms of the sort of, as you mentioned, is sometimes in terms of once employers are aware of what needs to be done and aware of those adjustments and how easy they are to put in place and the practices are updated, what are some of the benefits to employers of making that case for action in terms of that ease of making change, I guess?
So I think that the vast majority of people in our country want to do the right thing. They want to be inclusive, they want to provide opportunities. We all, I think, go about our daily lives treating others how we ourselves would like to be treated. But it's about making sure that there are the right skills and the right tools that workplaces have available to them to support disability employment. For me, it is a no-brainer, isn't it? The bottom line here is that when it comes down to it, I often argue when I'm talking to businesses, it isn't just the morally right thing to do, but it also makes eminent business sense to engage in this agenda. And for example, when we announced the Autism Employment Review that Robert Buckland's taking forward for government, it was great to talk to businesses that have been engaging in employing autistic people for some time and to hear from them all of the benefits that their businesses are getting out of that experience relative to some of the opportunities that they had before. When you think about innovation, when you think about problem solving, when you think about the diversity of your workforce, it was really heartening actually to hear the commitment of those employers to providing those opportunities and all of the knock-on positive benefits that they've enjoyed as a result of that. So for me, it's about eminent business sense, and in terms of making a success of whatever sort of employer you are, unlocking that opportunity, unlocking that potential, probably being far more representative of your customers. I spoke at a disability and policing conference a few weeks ago, and the point that I made there was that, and actually we've had pretty good engagement with disability confident with police forces, but making the point that, you know, policing is about representing the communities that you serve. And unless you've got that inclusion and that runs through everything that you're doing around recruitment, you're not genuinely inclusive. And so we need to make sure that workplaces of all types and sizes are engaging with this agenda. And I just think in more general terms, it adds so much to our workplaces and it leaves all of us better informed. I would argue that through the benefits of that employment, we all end up being better allies to disabled people in supporting them in their day-to-day lives. And I just think that that is a really positive force for good and something that Disability Confident helps us to achieve. But it makes eminent sense to engage in this agenda because there's so much potential, and it's a tragedy when that potential isn't realised. And we know, for example, that 1 in 5 disabled people would like to try work with the right support. To me, Disability Confident and everything that it brings is a really important tool that we have to unlock that employment opportunity amongst those people.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think in terms of removing those barriers for so many candidates that get faced, and you mentioned there in terms of the sort of wider agenda, I'd be really interested to hear a bit more about, you know, the wider government efforts to drive disability inclusion across sector. That'd be great to hear.
How long have we got? So there's a lot. I mean, so there's a lot happening, and I think it's really quite encouraging that I think back for the duration of my time that I've been in the House of Commons. I was first elected in 2015. And I cannot remember a time where there has been quite so much leadership from the very top of government around these issues, in terms of the Prime Minister, in terms of the Chancellor, in terms of my Secretary of State in the Department for Work and Pensions, but also the Secretary of State for Health, bringing government together to look at how we can deliver better outcomes to support more disabled people and people with health conditions. And that's reflected in the structural reform that we've announced that we're going to take forward, which is front and centre of that reform agenda. The problem we have at the moment is that, as an unintended consequence of decades and decades of welfare reform, there is a work disincentive built into the system. And I hear this continually in the conversations that I have when I'm out and about and doing my visits and in the meetings that I have and the conversations that I'm a part of, where people say to me, and it goes back to this point about 1 in 5 disabled people would like to try work with the right support. And people say to me, I would try work. I'd really like to try work. I've perhaps even identified something that I'd like to do. But they get closer to taking that employment opportunity on, and then the fear factor gets in the way. The fear that you will take on that work, that you'll try, it won't work out, and then you lose your benefit entitlement and you have to then reapply and be reassessed. That has to stop. And so the structural reforms that we are committed to introducing, that we consulted on through the Green Paper, we will deliver in the next Parliament. There is a firm commitment to do that. I hope that as we move closer to the general election, there will be cross-party agreement that that is the right reform and that we need to take it forward. We've done a lot of intensive work to develop it, you know, having that national conversation about what form that should take. And we're now workshopping the various elements of it to get that to a state of readiness. But removing that work disincentive, that barrier to work, could only be a good thing. And so it would be really good, I think, if we could take that forward in a sort of cross-party, joined-up, spirited way, because it's an important reform. I'd argue it's probably the biggest welfare reform for over a decade. So there's that. But we're not wasting any time, because there's progress that we can make in the shorter term. So things like, we sort of consulted on the white paper reforms, but part of the feedback that we received was around how we could improve people's experience of the benefit system, people's journey through it. So we are taking forward the various tests and trials that we committed to doing, for example, matching expert assessors with people's primary condition or disability. That's an important change. I hope it will help to sort of build confidence in decision making, get more decisions right first time. Things like the severe disability group, so not putting people through an assessment burden that just isn't necessary, and being able to take more decisions without the need for an assessment, particularly where people's disability or condition is unlikely to improve, particularly where health conditions are prevalent. But also things like fluctuating conditions that cause a real challenge for people, particularly in exploring employment. What we can do to better understand people's fluctuating conditions and making sure that their support entitlement is more reflective of that. And then there's all of the employment support that we've been announcing. So things like universal support, doing more of what we know works, that supported employment model, but also the place and train models as well. So it's about, in these early stages with the pioneers, getting on and doing that, individual placement and support in primary care, as well as that place and train approach. So working with someone to understand what their needs are, what their skills are, what their abilities are, what their aspirations are, helping them to find the right role, and then into that role, and then supporting them for 12 months to retain it. So there's a long-term piece of work going on there, and we want to make early progress in terms of getting on and delivering that employment support. That I think when you then layer on what I hope will be improvements to the journey through the system for people needing to access support, I hope that will be really positive. But also, when you consider that structural reform, I think as a package, it's a really significant endeavour that we're taking forward, and we want to do that in an inclusive way. We want to hear views about what we can do to make that the biggest success that it can be. But it's the right thing to do, and it's essential that we make progress and that we make the quickest possible progress, because there is all that potential. But I'm also really pleased that it focuses not just on job starts, but it also focuses on that retention piece as well, because, as I say, I think that should be front and centre. It isn't good enough just to support people into roles that perhaps then fall away because we're not equipping people with the right skills to be able to support people in the way that we would want to within our workplaces.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's really a lot of food for thought there, and I think also in terms of what you mentioned in terms of the employment support, I think that acknowledgement that obviously not all disabled people are in a position to work, so making sure that support is also in place as well is so impactful.
Yeah. And actually, just to say that, for example, it's about also additional work coach support, that perhaps people who felt they've not been able to engage with that, but who perhaps would like to explore work opportunities, or perhaps have not been able to as a result of the system, opening that up, as well as the sort of work that we're doing around occupational health, which I also think is really important in this space. We know that 90% of large businesses have occupational health coverage, but that drops right off to 17-18% within SMEs. So what can we do to try and help bridge that gap? What works? What can be scaled in a fairly short space of time to make sure that just at every stage there is greater wraparound support to sit alongside what I hope will be a DWP-led system with the structural reform, with the employment support, that focuses far more on tailoring to individuals' needs, understanding what they're able to do and focusing on what people can do rather than focusing overly on what people can't, which I think has often been the case in years gone by.
And I guess in terms of thinking about breaking down barriers, one of the things that I wanted to touch upon, to just in case member firms weren't aware of, and also employees that are watching this, is the Access to Work scheme, because I think it's something that for sort of moving beyond reasonable adjustments can be incredibly powerful tool when it's utilised. So could you maybe just talk me through, for people that might not be familiar with the Access to Work scheme, what is that scheme?
So the Access to Work scheme is all about government recognise, again, it's that spirit of partnership. It's about the fact that we expect businesses to comply with their legal duties, or employers to comply with their legal duties when it comes to reasonable adjustments. But we recognise that for some people, to support their employment, we need to go above and beyond to provide a level of support that facilitates that role. And so within Access to Work, there is a real flexibility to provide the right support to people to make sure that they have what they need in order to sustain that employment. That can be physical things, so it can, for example, contribute to purchase office equipment that might help to support someone to be able to take on a role, and actually might be the difference between someone being able to have that role or not have that role. But also with things like travel costs. So some of those costs that are more day-to-day that people experience, where they perhaps need to access a taxi to be able to get to and from work, we get in behind that as government to support it through the Access to Work scheme. We're also looking to evolve Access to Work further as well. So Access to Work Plus is all about taking access to work to the next level. Again, working with employers and with disabled people, for example, where there's a desire to employ a disabled person, working with that employer to understand what could be done with access to work support to make that job accessible and inclusive. So again, it's all about looking at how we can quite innovatively support employment opportunities for disabled people, again, focus on retention, focus on job starts, but to do that in quite an intensive way with those adjustments in place. But I also see it as a bit of a vehicle to provide a greater awareness to employers about what they ought to be doing under their legal duties. So it just helps. It's a vehicle that, it's a trusted brand. It's a very strong brand. It's one that a lot of people would recognise as having been important around delivery of the employment goals that we've set to date, and also facilitating meaningful employment opportunities for people. We're now also engaging with a working group that we stood up about how we kick on with access to work, again looking at that within the wider landscape that we're seeking to take forward, because I recognise that government has an important role to play in saying we think we can do better in terms of getting more disabled people into work and supporting more disabled people into work and unlocking that potential, but we've also got to play our part in resourcing it. So we want to explore what we can do to try and help ensure there's better understanding around standard reasonable adjustments, but also greater understanding of what access to work can offer, as well as moving that into the century that we now live in terms of digitalisation and claims being able to be made online. The early progress that we've made around that has been quite encouraging, some pretty good reports that is helping to bring some of the journey times down in terms of the waits to get that support in place and to get that support paid to people, particularly where they've got ongoing costs that they're incurring, getting those reimbursements made. But it's, again, I just think it's an important part of the jigsaw that I would encourage employers to explore, working with disabled people to make sure that they've got all the right support in place to facilitate their employment.
And I think it's coupling together, as you said, the adjustments with access to work, and it's employee-led as well, which I think is something that's quite key and pivotal. And I guess as well, when we're talking about adjustments, one of the things to remember is a lot of the time adjustments are free, are very simple, easy to do. I think the average cost of reasonable adjustments in the UK is £75 per individual, and then we do have schemes like Access to Work to support it. So there's so many different things to ensure that. Obviously, it's the employer's legal duty to make sure those adjustments are made, but there's sort of no excuse really for it. There's so many barriers that should be broken down through that.
And I think that speaks to, I think you're absolutely right, and it speaks to as well the change that we've all seen over the course of recent years and some of the opportunities around flexible working and home working.
Yeah.
And that won't always be right for everybody, but for some people, and again, we're currently consulting on the work capability assessment. The long-term plan is to scrap the work capability assessment. It's the right thing to do. But we're also looking at what we can do in the short term to explore whether there are opportunities around home working and flexible working that are not captured within the current work capability assessment descriptors because they date back to 2011, which is an age ago when you consider the world of work that we're now in. But for some people, I recognise that those opportunities may be the difference between being able to do some work with the right support and being able to do no work at all. And so those reasonable adjustments and the steps that businesses and employers more generally can take to support those employment opportunities, the awareness around that is critical. And I think what I'm hopefully getting across is that we're trying to move the whole system in the direction of opening up these opportunities and to try and do that in a really joined up way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I think it's really, really key to make sure that it's all brought in following the horrific pandemic that we've gone through. I think the silver lining is the flexible working, remote working is hopefully here to stay. And obviously that doesn't mean that workplaces shouldn't be accessible, but it's also ensuring that for those people, for example, for myself, there's no way I could run Patchwork Club if it wasn't for the fact that I was able to work from home. And I remember initially, we're moving away from those Friday day week working from home, and that's something that I think is really positive. I'm conscious of time and I want to make sure we have a couple of time for questions. So I'd like to open it up to the floor, both in person and virtually. I think, Richard, you've got the iPad there to manage the questions coming in. So we should have a couple of mics, I think, dotted around the room. Sorry, Adrian, I took it by storm.
Thank you. First of all, one comment on access to work. It's a fantastic scheme. My company's made really good use of it, as well as the things that Tom mentioned. There's really good job coach available, not just generic, but quite specialist. So yeah, just doing a plug for access to work there. The second comment is in relation to government support for employers who are trying to recruit and train up people who are disabled. So my company greatly benefited from the government Kickstart scheme that was targeted at people on universal credit, ages between 18 to 24. We managed to recruit a fair amount of disabled people through that scheme. So my company, as a bit of background, is an investment consulting business, and we actively recruit autistic and neurodiverse financial analysts. So we would like to recruit a lot more people than we do, but without the subsidies, we've got a long queue of people who want a job with us, but because we need to make sure our resources are well managed, we don't have the incentive to do that just yet, just because of the business structure. So is there any plans on the government side to actually directly subsidise people who are disabled and looking for jobs to get some form of subsidy like the Kickstart scheme did?
So I think there's always a really difficult balance here. And one of the things that I'm always very mindful of is wanting to ensure that these employment opportunities that we're facilitating are durable and long-term, because what I wouldn't want is to develop a scheme whereby somebody takes on a role, they're absolutely smashing it and doing really well, and then that falls away because government support changes in terms of subsidy for a particular scheme. So there's always that dynamic that comes into some of the thinking. Where I think we can make the real difference and provide that support, and actually I'd be really keen to hear your insights, actually, because you mentioned autism employment as part of Robert Buckland's review, and actually I'll ask the team to put you in touch with the review to make sure that we can capture your learning and your experiences, because we've asked Robert to come forward with some recommendations about what we can do to really try and kick on with that agenda. But where I think we can make the difference, and it'll begin to be seen in terms of outcomes now that we've got schemes like universal support started up, I think where the real value that government can add is through those schemes, working with the providers who help us to deliver them, but also working with businesses, is around the employment support piece and that intensive working, hopefully with the right skills and the right knowledge to be able to lever in all of the support that can help to stack that up. So things like the access to work offer, it's really important when we roll out universal support placements around the country that what actually is happening is that the teams delivering that, working with the businesses, working with job centres, working with disabled people and the individuals specifically who are looking to take on those opportunities, is that they are fully aware of and sighted on, and there's the sort of training side, to just make sure that we are then able to layer on all of the different forms of help that we're able to provide to make that stack up as much as possible. And as I say, we've of course got a considerable number of vacancies in our economy. We think that it's right that we put our effort and put our shoulder to the wheel to make sure that we support businesses to try and help fill them and to try and help employers more generally to fill them. But if you've got particular insights around what more you think we could do, particularly around autism employment, but also as we take forward schemes like universal support and that quite intensive employment support that is all around identifying what someone's needs are, what their capabilities are, what their aspirations are, into the role and then to retain it, I'd be really keen to hear that.
Thank you. Richard, I think you're monitoring the questions we've got coming in virtually, so if you're on the microphone.
So David's asked a question.
Oh wait, hold on, wait, the microphone, sorry.
Sorry about that. So a couple of questions. One from David. He's asked a question. As it's a UK government-specific scheme, just wondered if there's a global scheme or if you had any recommendation for firms that may be global when trying to make the case for senior leaders of this scheme.
So it's quite interesting actually. So when I was at the UN at COS back in June, one of the things that I was asked quite a bit about was about disability confident and was about access to work. So there's a recognition internationally that these are really good schemes. And so it was great actually, because they would often use the words world leader when they talked about those schemes. They wanted to understand more about what they could do to try and adopt some of those practices. And actually officials are quite regularly speaking to international counterparts about these schemes. And actually, can I just while I'm here, can I say thank you to Amanda, who obviously does so much work around disability confident. And it is her 40th year in the Department for Work and Pensions this year. And a lot of the success that we've had is down to the determination of people like Amanda and her team, who, and she'll be really embarrassed about this, who helped to make the scheme the success that it is. But certainly there are conversations that we are having globally about our experiences of disability confident, and they're interested in our learning and what they might be able to do to replicate some of that. But I also take a very inclusive approach in the sense that we don't have all of the answers. And that's why the partnership approach to some of this is crucial. And that's why working with all of you and working with employers and working with businesses and working with disabled people as a whole is really important as we develop our support and we iterate it to a changing world of work and as we understand people's needs more effectively. But certainly very open-minded when it comes to international comparators and what we can learn from other countries too. And things like the sort of individual placement and support model that we're delivering through universal support was an employment scheme that was first, for example, utilised quite successfully in the US. And so there's been learning from that we've been able to take forward.
And I think it's all about taking action, and I think the scheme provides a great framework for that enables employers. So I know a lot of the firms in this room are global firms, so I think it's a really key framework to then allow for that action, that monitoring to be put in place so you can actually track progress against that as well.
And actually, it's an area that we could explore as part of our review that we're now able to do because of the NDS moving forward.
Definitely. I think we've got time for one final question from the floor. I know we've got some coming in virtual.
Hi. I just really want to echo, the benefits of access to work. Being someone who's actually benefited from that program myself, being severely visually impaired, and also the occupational health aspect of where companies having that available for people like myself. And being a champion for disability workplace inclusion as well, and as well as neurodiversity workplace inclusion. One of the things that I find, particularly within our industry, with the investment side, there's a lot of exams and qualifications, and the apprenticeship program is particularly difficult to unlock because I think there's a lot of funds there that are trapped. And we're wondering whether there's any way in which something there that can bridge that money. We've talked about lack of subsidy, but there's also pockets of funds whereby that can then be sort of directed to training and upskilling or giving skills to people with disabilities and neurodiversity. Don't know whether that's something that is part of what you've looked at before.
So one of the great things about this role, there's many great things about this role, but one of the really helpful parts of it is the sort of cross-government work that you help to take forward. And so that's certainly something I'm very keen and willing to explore with DFE colleagues around the join-up between that support and the sort of apprenticeship scheme and what we can do as DWP to try and tie into that. Things like the adjustments passports that we've been taking forward in recent times are, again, a really important tool. And we've introduced those in a number of areas, and there's sort of plans for more of that to come forward. Getting to a place where people need to less frequently explain what their needs are and to be able to move that support around more readily. And I think that is really important from understanding what those basic needs are and not having to constantly retell that story. But we also ought to be exploring, and we will explore, what we can do around sort of training and support and make sure that there's that really joined up offer. And again, I think that's where things like universal support have a role to play in terms of bringing together, and it sort of goes back to that first question as well, about making sure that it is a holistic offer, that where there are opportunities to help people to not only take on a role but to progress within it with the right training and support around that are areas that we should be exploring. We should be ambitious for this, and we are ambitious for this. And I think that sort of goes to the point that you're making around what more we can do to make that training opportunity available for more disabled people as part of that overall journey into work, and hopefully to then go on and retain work and to progress within it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really brilliant question. I think we're going to have to call it a day for questions, because I want to make sure we've got time for our next brilliant panel we've got on board. But Minister, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a really helpful discussion. I think, if anything's just highlighted how important it is that disability inclusion is prioritised on business agendas. So thank you for your time, and I'll hand over to Kerry now.
Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Kerry Amies. I'm here as Diversity Project Ambassador, although I'm a HR practitioner by trade. I'm delighted to moderate our lovely panel this morning to follow on from our really interesting overview of the Disability Confidence Scheme and the case, both business-wise and social-wise for fostering sort of more inclusion within our industry. So really excited to be able to introduce 4 panellists and 4 organisations that have already gone down the Disability Confidence Scheme route, have tried and tested it, and can share their learnings, their opportunities and some of the challenges along the way with you all. For the purposes of inclusive presenting, I will share that I am a white woman in my early 40s, blonde hair, blue eyes, and today wearing a navy suit with a green shirt, and my pronouns are she, her. I will hand over to my panellists to introduce themselves in a similar manner, and then also describe their involvement in the Disability Confidence Scheme. So if I start perhaps with you, Jess, and then we can continue down the line.
Great, thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Jess Hardy, Inclusion Manager for AXA UK and Ireland. My pronouns are she, her. Today I'm wearing a leopard print dress and black shiny shoes, and I'm in my, I have to say, mid-30s now. We are a disability confident leader at AXA UK, and we've held that status since 2018, and we recently renewed.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Brady. I work for Morningstar. I'm a business partner specialist there. I'm also the EMEA lead for our Disability Employee Resource Group. Today I am wearing a cream jumpsuit with black shoes. I have brown hair, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm white, Irish, and I'm hearing impaired.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Divya Sharma. I lead Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Invesco. It's an asset management company for the Europe, Middle East and Africa region. I am of Indian origin. I have dark brown hair, dark brown eyes. I'm wearing a black blazer with a check shirt and a black skirt today. And Invesco is a level 2 disability confident employer.
Hi, I'm Diane Lightfoot. I'm CEO of Business Disability Forum, and we're a not-for-profit membership organisation. I'm delighted to work with all these organisations, and we support businesses of all shapes and sizes and sectors to get better at recruiting and retaining and developing disabled employees, and also at serving disabled customers. And we now work with almost 600 members, of which at least half of them operate outside the UK. Audio description, I'm 50 and I'm proud of that fact. I'm a white woman, I'm 5'3" on a good day. I am growing out my darkish brown hair to be sort of salt and pepper. I've got brown eyes, and my pronouns are she and hers. And I'm wearing an assortment of things, including some cream vegan loafers.
Thank you for those introductions. So as before, we'll spend a bit of time going through some pre-planned questions just to kick things off, but we'll also give you as an audience an opportunity to ask questions. So please start thinking of those. And for those of you that have joined us online, please do put those questions through the Q&A, and we'll get through as many as we can in the time available. So just starting off with, I guess, your motivations, could you tell us a little bit around why it was important for your organisations to become disability confident? And I'll perhaps start with you, Emily, at Morningstar.
Yeah, sure. So when I first joined Morningstar, it was clear that we didn't have a lot in place in terms of disability inclusion, but I could see that there was a real passion to do better. And, you know, that's why I kind of felt it was really important for us to join this scheme, to create and strive for that disability inclusive culture, but also hold our firm accountable as well. In addition to that, I mean, it's enabled us to leverage on the partnerships of the Business Disability Forum, create employee resource groups that, you know, can give that sense of belonging, which has in turn improved the increase in self-ID and disclosure, which has enabled more people to get the adjustments that they need. And yeah.
Excellent. And Jess, from your side, did you have similar motivations?
Yeah, and we'd been a 2 ticks employer when it was 2 ticks, and then a disability confident employer, but our employee network for Disability Able, they really wanted to push for a leader status, and to get that from your employees is really rich, and it was a real call to action for me, right, we need to do better here. So they were a real driver for us in making it to that leader level. And also externally, I just felt in terms of some of our competitors and just widely in the financial services, though we were a committed employer, we weren't doing as much as we could, and I wanted to change that.
Great, okay. And Divya, what were your motivations at Invesco?
So much like what Jess and Emily have shared, it was again very grassroots driven. So we had a few active volunteers within our employee base who participated in the disability work stream at Diversity Project. And I think they were key drivers in the conversation around disability and how we can become part of this scheme. I think that clubbed with senior executive sponsorship. So our chief marketing officer for the region was a firm believer in promoting diversity and welcoming disabled colleagues. I think that kind of coupled together allowed us to make progress here.
Excellent. All right. So lots of themes coming up there in terms of talent attraction and employee retention, and you know that overall sense of belonging, which we know is really important for our diversity, equity, and inclusion work more broadly. So having first identified that ambition to become disability confident, can you talk us through sort of how you secured sort of that organisational buy-in to make the change success? And Jess, I'll come to you on that one.
Yeah, so for us it was around relating it to a business challenge, and the labour market was a business challenge in that period when we wanted to become a leader, and we were missing out on some really crucial talent because we maybe couldn't give them the reasonable adjustments that they needed, etc. And I think by relating it to a business challenge, the leaders stood up and listened, because it's obviously going to have an impact on profit and be able to do business. And also for us, our workforce was shifting in terms of age demographics. So the average age of acquiring a condition is 54. 25% of our workforce are over the age of 50. And if we don't become better in the disability space, we're going to lose that talent. And if, like, we know for a fact some of our commercial underwriters fit in that space, and if they were all to retire or leave at the same time, then that again, it is a challenge that we would need to face into.
Absolutely, yes. And Emily, you had also some opportunities there that you took to sort of influence sort of your leadership to get strong buy-in. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, Morningstar is a very data-driven company. So you know, to be able to speak the language of those leaders, to get that buy-in was crucial, and through that is through data and facts. So part of that was looking, I suppose, at from a disclosure rate, which then in turn the establishment of, like I said, the employee resource group. But I suppose presenting the argument that you know, creating a disability inclusive environment is good from a commercial point of view, really helped kind of, I suppose, drive that business case. But also then just the kind of increase then in performance when people got the adjustments and so on really helped with that case.
Excellent. Okay, so having got that sort of senior leadership on board and identified the need, what were sort of the next steps in terms of sort of the process for becoming business disability confident? How did you sort of set that up within your organisations? And Divya, perhaps if I come to you on that one.
Yeah, so we started with putting together a working group. So it was a cross-functional working group that had representation from learning and development, you know, looking at once the disabled colleagues are in the organization, what kind of learning opportunities do we offer them? partners from talent acquisition, looking at external partnerships, our benefits team to see how we could revise the benefit policy that we had in place to accommodate disabled colleagues. So I think this collective, thought leadership kind of allowed us to make progress and then move from level 1 to level 2 of the scheme.
Fantastic, that's great. And sort of throughout that process, I'm sure there were a couple of sort of trickier steps that came up along the way. So I'd like to bring sort of Diane in at this point and get a feel for, you know, what are the trickiest parts of the scheme that employers typically come to you, I guess, for advice, or that you hear is particularly sort of challenging.
Sure. So we provide validation on behalf of the DWP and Disability Confident team to our members and partners. And we also support them to progress through levels 1, 2 and 3. So level 3 is the one that you have to have externally validated, as Beth was sharing at the beginning. One thing is that we quite often see that there's a little bit of a road bump at level 3, and that some of the things that people have self-assessed themselves as actually achieving are maybe slightly over-generous when they actually come to being externally validated. So we very much handhold through that process. It's not just a kind of, no, you haven't got it. It's like, okay, how can you embed this and make this real? And the one thing that people find the hardest, for good reasons, is the offer and interview scheme. So it used to be called the Guaranteed Interview Scheme, and it's changed, which is good. But as it's written, it requires you to offer an interview to anybody who ticks the box, who has a disability and who meets the minimum essential criteria for the role. And that's fine, but it can be very, very tricky logistically for very big volume hires, for example, to actually be able to see everybody that has ticked that box. It's sometimes also difficult with processes. So if organisations have a portal, for example, that they use that doesn't have that built in, then actually changing the processes to enable that to happen can be very difficult. We do get some firms as well whose legal teams are really worried about potential discrimination cases, so advise their teams not to use it. And this is often based on a misunderstanding about, you know, what the minimum criteria is, and actually on writing a really good person specification that really spells out what you need. But there is that risk. And possibly the most sensitive bit is that some disabled people don't like it. So there's often that kind of, we see this in like focus groups, this kind of conundrum of, I really want to get this job, I really want to get it on merit, but I'm not sure I'll get an interview unless I tick the box. So it's that kind of dynamic that can be quite tricky. So what we tend to advise, so we feed all this back to Amanda's team, Amanda, who started at DWP when she was 10 years old, clearly. Amazing. And so we either suggest that organisations implement it for a few roles, so maybe where it's lower volume or it's a very specific process that can go outside of, say, the portal or whatever it is, or we ask them to demonstrate other ways that they are taking positive action to encourage disabled candidates to apply and progress through the process. But we do see that when organisations do it and do it well, it can be really transformational in terms of culture. So we do try and work with it rather than try and say we'll do something different instead. But that's the key one.
Thank you. It's really insightful. And Jess, I believe that's something that AXA had to tackle as well from a systems perspective.
Yeah, we have struggled with that element of it. So we, between 2018 and getting revalidated last year, we started a service called the Accessibility Concierge. So it's led out of our talent acquisition team, and we have a dedicated talent acquisition partner who takes the candidate who's ticked that they need a reasonable adjustments through the journey. So they have a one-to-one session with the candidate around what reasonable adjustments they need. They then have a blind session with the hiring manager, so they don't tell them what the condition is or anything like this, but they are very like, these are reasonable adjustments that you will need to give. The one we struggle with at the moment quite a lot is with interview questions. So a lot of neurodiverse candidates coming through now are asking for questions in advance or in a chat function if it's by a video conference. So we're just working out how to do that and to make it fairly. But to Diane's point, our ABLE network are very divided about this scheme. Because again, that whole getting it on merit, and I get that because I think when the Women in Finance Charter first came out, there was that thing amongst women who wanted to get the job on merit rather than because they were a woman. So we just need to balance that out as well. But the accessibility concierge for us has been a game changer, and the success rate of candidates coming through and being successful in getting a role is really, really good now. So kudos to Jen Manuel, our talent acquisition partner, who runs that.
That's excellent. So great idea there to have a recruitment concierge, which I'm sure other organisations may also want to adopt. Just thinking about other practices that you've introduced as a result of reviewing the Disability Confidence Scheme and gaining that accreditation, could you give me perhaps one practice from Invesco and Morningstar that you've introduced?
Yeah, very happy to. So I was actually referring to my notes. So I would club them under 3 buckets. So the first was things we did around awareness building. So we organized different kinds of training to make sure colleagues in the organization understood what the barriers and challenges were that disabled colleagues face, including offering training to hiring managers. Then we extended that out to disability training for all colleagues. So we partnered with an organization called WizKids that ran this for all EMEA-wide colleagues, including the legal aspects related to hiring disabled colleagues. And we're now extending that to our North American colleagues, which is great. We also ran neurodiversity champions training in partnership with Optimize. So we have over 50 colleagues in this region who now are called neurodiversity champions. And they are like the first port of call for anyone who wants to have a conversation, is seeking resources or additional information related to neurodiversity or neurodiverse candidates, colleagues, and so on. In terms of policy change through our neurodiversity and disability business resource groups, we've actually had a workplace adjustment policy now created by colleagues who have lived experience and an understanding of what candidates and colleagues go through in their journey at Invesco. So that's a policy that we're about to roll out. And then we basically looked at recruitment and retention more broadly. So we partnered with Even Break. They have a Meet the Employer session that they do. So we talk about the career progression, career journey, the options and facilities that disabled colleagues would have at Invesco. So that's been a great platform to reach out to a large number of colleagues. And then lastly, I think something that we've done, which I'm really proud of, is we introduced neurodiversity internships. We've been running them for 2 years now. So we partnered with an organization called AS Mentoring, and they've helped us identify individuals who are on the neurodiversity spectrum for this internship. We try and run one in London and one in our European offices. We haven't been that successful in Europe, so we run them as 2 internships out of our London office.
That's great, given the interest that we had earlier in sort of early careers openings. Out of interest, what was the difference in terms of it maybe not being so successful in your European locations?
So I think it's difficult for us to find a partner. Obviously, neurodiversity as a topic is not very widely spoken about. In fact, many people are not even aware of what it actually consists of. So I think finding a partner has been challenging for us, or finding individuals who've identified on the spectrum coming up for the interview has been challenging as well.
Understood. Okay. And Emily, a practice from Morningstar that you introduced or that you revamped as a result of your business disability confident work?
Yeah, so one of the things that we looked at was from an onboarding perspective and how we're capturing that data from disability and long-term conditions. So in Workday, we've revamped that, giving a kind of a clearer list of those drop-down options, but we've also been working with our procurement and IT team to effectively develop an inventory assessment technology list that we can then tie with from an onboarding perspective when someone, let's say, discloses that they have ADHD or dyslexia, that we have the relevant assistive technology that we can put on their laptops from day one, from when they come in, just to give that better user experience.
That's great. It's great to have that seamless approach. And we talked a little bit earlier around sort of the costs of adjustments, and that perhaps being a reason for employers sort of fearing sort of entering this scheme, even though so the reality suggests that the cost is fairly small. Could you give us a flavour of some of the most sort of typical requests that you've had from candidates? And Jess, maybe I'll ask you about that one, given you've set up your concierge scheme.
Yeah, so I would say the questions, as I said earlier, is the big one that we do get asked for. Technology as well, in order to do interviews as well is quite important. We've been doing a lot of work with our comms team just to make comms more accessible in general. Not as a reasonable adjustment, but just for everybody. And I was really pleased the other day that we had our first request through for a BSL interpreter for an event for one of our road shows. We've never had that before in my 16 years of employment. And I was like, yes, I feel like the message is getting out there. Unfortunately, they only gave me 10 days to get the BSL interpreter. But thanks to Business Disability Forum, we've sorted that out now. So that's really good. But I do think like the cost is an interesting one, because you do get some reasonable adjustments which do cost a lot of money, particularly if it's around archaic systems and the need for scripting to work with assistive technology. But giving someone interview questions in advance, you can obviously do for free. So I think don't let the cost be a barrier necessarily. And also just going back to the access to work, we've started to work more broadly with access to work, and I have to say, like, I didn't even really know about it until a year ago, and it has made a big difference, and we've got people actively doing it, and they're like so thankful. And I think as well, the whole hybrid working, there's been a perception that some disabled people just don't want to come into the office, which actually it's the complete opposite. So being able to get a taxi into work is great.
That's fantastic. Diane, what's your experience been of those adjustment requests? Are there ones that sort of come to you for specific advice?
So workplace adjustments is consistently the top topic to our advice service. And I will give a little plug to our Great Big Workplace Adjustment Survey, which we launched back in June. It was a repeat of one we did 2018 to 19, to look at the experiences actually of employees and their managers in getting and delivering workplace adjustments. So I recommend that to you. It's on our website, freely available. There's loads of stuff in it. There are some that cost a lot of money, like BSL interpretation, and it's one thing that we raise with the Minister and officials quite a lot, that the access to work cap doesn't cover actually often the cost of that. But that is it's a very small, very important, but very small percentage of claims. And actually so many adjustments are free or very, very inexpensive, but sometimes those ones are more difficult culturally to implement because people are afraid to ask them. So things like having a fixed desk in a hot desk environment, or having a dedicated parking space when you have a condition that isn't immediately visible, things like that, and the confidence of the employee to ask for it and actually to share they have a condition, and then the manager to be able to actually be empowered to go and do that. And one really good example I heard from one of our organisations was a woman who was deaf in one ear, and she'd only told the diversity manager, but she'd not told her line manager. And this was a hot desk environment, and the way she was managing was by making sure she always got a desk next to the window so that no one could approach her on the side where she couldn't hear. And we just talked about the fact that she must be going through so much stress every day. And I said, does she come in early? And she did. And that fear and anxiety every day about, am I going to get that desk? When you would hope it would be such a simple thing to say to your line manager, hey, I'm deaf in this ear, could I have this as a fixed desk? But for whatever reason, she didn't feel able to do that. And so I think that the cultural piece that underpins this cannot be underestimated. And things like Alex at the beginning sharing that you have a diagnosis of depression, anxiety. I've also got a diagnosis of depression, and I have a form of blood cancer. And I share that just because it opens up a conversation for other people to go, okay, I'll share what I've got. So I think practicalities, but actually feeling okay to ask is huge.
Yeah, that culture change is so important, isn't it? And you've sort of started to see a bit of that at Morningstar already as a result of becoming sort of level 1 accredited. Can you talk us through that a little bit, Emily?
Yeah, sure. So as I sort of said before, it's very much opened the conversation in our organisation of having a disability inclusive culture. And it's enabled us, I suppose, to scrutinise our policies and practices. But it's also kind of launched the employee resource group that, as I said before, has really given that sort of sense of community and sense of belonging, which going back to your culture piece is really key for this, which has enabled people to disclose and get the adjustments that they need. But also, I suppose, other benefits, leveraging Business Disability Forum, sorry, I'm your spokesperson, has been instrumental for our employees and managers in terms of coaching, training, and so on. And then also from sort of a recruitment employer brand perspective, you know, we are now seeing more candidates come forward and disclose, you know, what adjustments they need during that experience. And then also, you know, I suppose, yeah, speaking about me, it's enabled me to disclose to people about my own hearing impairment and what needs I might need, and it's, you know, enabled a dialogue, and that's been great.
Yeah. It's great to hear that it's fostered that psychological safety within your organisation across a number of different individuals. And Jess AXA obviously at the highest level within the scheme. What sort of measurements of success have you been able to demonstrate?
So our retention of our disabled employees is relatively good, which is great. And I think back in 2021 we launched our diversity data campaign, but people weren't forthcoming to disclose their disability. It was the second least answered question. We weren't at a place where we could do anything with the data because we didn't really have enough. But then in 2022, when we revalidated it, we put a big comms out, we did a big promo on it, we did manager awareness sessions, what it meant, and the data started coming in. And we're now above 60%. I think we were 61.5 this morning. We've done some initial analysis just to check around like performance ratings and progression, just to see if there's any different differentiators there. And from a performance rating perspective, there was nothing alarming, which is absolutely great. So I think it's just been a cultural shift where I think people who do have a disability or long-term health condition think they actually do mean business and it's not a tick box, and it's just that shift in culture where they do feel like they belong. So for us, it's been really great. And I just think the more people sharing their lived experience now, and you know, that helps other employees, so people, you know, openly talking about some really tough things. Today's World Mental Health Day. A lady's written a lovely blog and she shared her expression around postnatal depression and domestic abuse, and she's done that because she's felt safe to do it. And I think that's a real testimony to like pursuing the Disability Confident Leader scheme.
That's fabulous. Well, that's a brilliant note to pause on whilst we go to the audience for questions. I can see a couple that have come in sort of virtually, but please raise your hand in the room if you would like to ask a question. We'll get a microphone here. I think there's a question at the front here, this gentleman in pink.
Hi, thank you. First of all, thank you very much indeed for putting this on this event. It's really, really good to kind of hear other people's kind of war stories, as it were, and where they've been and how they've got there. I think, Diane, you talked about fear, and then Jess, you very nicely segued into the fact that, you know, you want to get the data from folks, but they're not necessarily keen to share that. I think one of the things that we're facing at the moment is actually getting getting over that hump, and kind of it's great to say it's okay to not be okay and blah blah blah, but actually how do you make that happen? How do you make that safe environment? Yeah, that would be my question, please.
So I think there's an element of you need top down and bottom up, and I think this is where your employee resource group plays such a big part. And I think our sort of like moment, I guess, in the sand was when I was asked to arrange a disability session for our management committee, and Adrian from Business Disability Forum came and did that with our management committee. It was a small forum, it was a safe space, and I could just see a change in then another business leader saying, oh, Jess, can we get that replicated for my own management committee? Can you come and do it to this management committee? And, you know, then every business unit that we had within our UK&I business had some sort of disability inclusion awareness session at a top level, and then you had your network also pushing it up from the bottom. And I guess I'm sort of like the jam in the middle almost of trying to make sure that it's evenly spread out. But I think the data is crucial, but my advice on data is I think sometimes we spent so much time getting hung up on the quantitative that we've maybe not had enough detailed look at the qualitative, and your feedback is so powerful. So in the inclusion survey, yes, we absolutely pay attention to the numbers, but I like to get into the detail of what are people actually feeling. So, I mean, the requirement for data is not going to go away, as you all know, if you're FCA regulated. So I just think don't lose sight of like asking people, because the more you ask people and the safer they will feel to tell you more. And I think sometimes as leaders we just need to get a bit vulnerable and be honest. Actually, I'm uncomfortable about this, educate me. Reverse mentoring is a great thing for that. Our ABLE network have reverse mentored some of our management committee, and that was a great way to get that dialogue. And then with in true reverse mentoring fashion, they've then also got something out of it themselves, where it's a networking opportunity, an invite to a leadership conference that they might not have never had the opportunity to go to. So that's another avenue to explore.
If I can just add one point there. So our journey at Invesco has been very similar to what Jess described. But I think one thing that's really important is to articulate the why of why you're collecting the data, and then to substantiate that with actual progress that you're making at the organization through the qualitative experience of individuals. So I think that worked really well for us at Invesco. So we also launched a demographic data collection campaign at the end of 2020. It didn't really pick up that well. And then we had to relaunch a second campaign where we actually brought in storytelling. So individuals actually sharing their experiences, building an understanding of the organization on why this data was important. But I think also clearly articulating from the senior management level down into the organization, what were we going to do with that data, and how having it would actually help us become better at, I don't know, a part of a particular scheme or a particular charter that we're already enrolled in. And I think that really kind of drove home the point. And we're also at a 71% completion rate in the region, which is great, I think.
Could I add one very small additional thing? Completely agree with all that. I also think the language you use is really important. So we advise not saying disclose or declare, but tell or share, because it's much more positive or at least neutral. And we work with one central government department that had 6% of people ticked yes to the question, are you disabled? And they instinctively felt that that number was not representative. So the following year, we worked with them and they changed it to, do you consider yourself to have a disability or long-term condition such as depression, diabetes, MS, HIV, epilepsy? They listed a few, and it went up to 16% just by changing the question. So
that's great. Great practical advice there. And we've got sort of a related question here online with someone sort of asking about getting buy-in at all levels of corporate organisations when it comes to recruiting, developing and retaining disabled talent. Anyone else would like to comment on that piece?
I think accessibility plays a big part in that, because if you can recruit them in, you need to retain them. The cost of not retaining them is just massive. And I think where certainly we're struggling a little bit, and peers in the industry are struggling, is with assistive tech and like getting it through IT security and data protection and making sure that the cloud's here and the cloud's there. I mean, the other day I thought, like, actually I think I work in IT, the amount of clouds I've described today. But I think that can be a barrier. So I think similar to Emma, we've just added a question onto our onboarding portal to ask up front if they need any assistive tech, so that we can get some lead-in time to get it organised. And if it's on the estate, great. If it's not, we need to get out and acquire it. But we have a dedicated workplace accessibility manager now, and she's absolutely great. She came from RNIB, she's got lived experience, and just having that insight in the company has been so useful. And I think we've got a journey to go on with accessibility, and I think we just need to get more people on the journey with that. You need your key stakeholders in the right place, but IT and procurement are really key in that, because you need everything that's procured or bought to be accessible, and that's a real change in thinking, as Diane was saying about your culture. It needs to start, like, everything you do needs to have accessibility and disability in mind.
If I could add a point to that as well, I think it's also important to understand the human element of it. So technology and the facilities is one aspect. I think identifying the skills that disabled colleagues bring to the table and calling that out very clearly, so that hiring managers are very clear on what skill set are you hiring for, and what is it that, let's say, for example, somebody on the neurodiversity spectrum might bring to the table that kind of fits in and will add value to that role. I think articulating that is also very important, and that's something that we are, consciously trying to do in our hiring manager training, where we try and call out the skills for the role rather than maybe the most relevant experience that they might bring to the table.
That's great. And just staying with you, Divya, we've had a couple more questions come through. Someone, Annie, has said she loved hearing about the neurodiversity internship. What do you feel was the biggest barrier to participation there?
It's a very good question, and I think my neurodiversity BRG co-chairs will probably be better positioned to answer that. But I think our learning was that identifying that partner here in the UK was key to success. They had I think, access to the right pool of candidates, and they were actually instrumental in helping hiring managers understand the skills, and the qualities that somebody who is on the spectrum would bring to the table, and then relate that to the kind of internship we were trying to identify for them. I think in terms of a challenge, like I mentioned, not many individuals here in the UK, I think not many countries in Europe as well are very comfortable talking about it. They're not even on their journey to build awareness of what these things entail, and therefore what do employers need to do. So I think bridging that gap, even in our regional offices, was a key challenge for us.
And we've got a live question here in the room, so let's go to that one.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm Laurie Edmonds. I'm the co-chair of GAIN, and just to complete the picture, I'm 6'2". I'm 75. I'm wearing a suit, and one of the few people these days that still wears a tie. The point that I really want to make is I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. GAIN, with the Group for Autism Insurance Investment and Neurodiversity, has just become official partners of the Diversity Project, and we are totally thrilled about that. I'm also the father of 2 dyslexic sons, one of whom, as it happens, has just become co-chair of the Neurodiversity Workstream for the Diversity Project, which had nothing to do with me. But the point that I really wanted to make was I'm simply thrilled to be here, and especially because this is the first of 2 sessions about diversity, equity and inclusion I'm going to today. This morning I'm here with the investment industry. This afternoon the Association of British Insurers has a diversity, equity and inclusion summit. Now, if anybody had said to me 10 years ago when I started getting interested in this sort of thing, that I would have a clash between between the investment industry and the insurers, I simply wouldn't have believed it. So I think it's wonderful what's happening. But just perhaps one salutary and I hope not sour note is we're in our company here with people who are interested in this. It was wonderful to see the initiative getting rolling and getting broadly accepted. But the point I'd like to make is we've still got quite a long way to go. And in that direction, I'd just like to briefly cite something that appeared in the Daily Telegraph last week, a report of a doctor who just won an industry tribunal case because he'd been sacked by the medical director of the area he worked in because he was following a disclosure that he was autistic. The person went on to suggest that he should rely less on email. He should do that. He should deal with his people face to face rather than email, because it's easy to misinterpret email. Just watch the face of people, not winding people up, because you get people's responses, don't you? You can see if you're winding someone up. Well, to which the doctor concerned replied, often not, unfortunately. Now, the tribunal found in favour of the doctor. He was, after the person he was speaking to advised him to make Joe Bloggs a cup of tea in the morning or something, things that just make you some of the team, the doctor concerned went off sick and didn't return until November. When he came back, an investigation into his behaviour at work concluded he was not carrying out his duties properly, and he was sacked. Now, this is terrible stuff, and delightful that the panel decided that he had a valid case for wrongful dismissal. Now, so I read that and I thought, great, we are really getting somewhere. We are really getting somewhere. And then I read the comments. Now, bear in mind, this is an article in the Daily Telegraph, but let me give you some of the responses from the comments. First one, so he can't do the job then. The surgeon couldn't talk to colleagues face to face, but was able to represent himself in court for 26 days. How did he manage that then? Not fit for purpose then. How can he possibly do his job? Once she knew of the diagnosis, the medical director should have immediately put him on leave. So you can't do a job. If you can't do a job, you can't do it. We need to stop pandering to this sort of crap. If he'd killed someone through negligence, it'd be a different story. A typical example of what this country has become, too many overly sensitive people chasing money. If you don't want to do the job, you shouldn't get the money, more pandering to a chancer. I mean, and so on. And there's 26 comments like that. So it's wonderful to see the initiative being taken, and I'm so encouraged by it all. But by crikey, have we still got a job to do?
Absolutely, so I think that's a point very well made. And you know, we've spoken already a little bit about the cultural change that obviously is not one overnight. And you know, this is great work that your organisations are doing and fostering. We sort of skipped over a question that was just sort of asking about sort of timeline. So I just want to touch on that before we close, just to give other organisations an indication of how long it took you to progress to each level. So just very briefly, from Morningstar to get to level 1.
Yeah, so I joined Morningstar February last year, and you know, as I said, part of trying to get buy-in is obviously gathering the data and being able to meet with the various leaders, which can take time and convincing and so on. But effectively, I actually met with the Business Disability Forum, who were really helping guide, because it is overwhelming, particularly when you're starting on the journey. There's just so much that you just don't know where to start. So they were certainly very helpful in terms of guiding that. And then that was in September. So yeah, from I suppose when I joined February to September, and then October we signed with the Disability Confident Employer Scheme. We're on level 1 now. We're taking our time to get to level 2 because yeah, I mean there's so much in it. We want to make sure that we're doing everything right. So yeah.
And Divya, for Invesco getting to level 2?
So it took us a year to move from level 1 to level 2, and we're presently in the process of submitting our application for level 3, thanks to a Business Disability Forum as well. So hopefully, you know, that would be about 2 years from level 2 to level 3 for us.
And for AXA to get to that highest level 3?
So to get from committed to leader, we were a year in planning to getting validated, and then when we renewed, again it was a good 6 months to get everything together, make sure you got all your stakeholders involved as well.
Excellent, that's great. So if people got more specific questions around those levels, please feel free to approach our panellists within the networking session, or to reach out to the disability or neurodiversity work streams of the Diversity Project, and we can answer that. Just before we bring this panel discussion to a close, I'd just like to have one thing from each of you that you would give as a piece of advice for organisations here that are starting out on their disability confident journey or wanting to progress it to the next level. So perhaps starting with Diane.
I would say just get started and don't be afraid. And obviously we're to help, as my fan club has attested, which is very lovely. But actually be proud of where you're at. So it doesn't have to be a race to become leader. Fabulous when you become leader, but be really proud of being committed. And then be really proud of being employers. You know, so just get started, and we're here to help.
Yeah, so I'm a very positive person, so I'll end on a positive note. I think of the opportunities that you would unlock as an employer, and the value in terms of soft skills and great technical skills that disabled colleagues will bring to the table if you do bring them into your team.
I would say if you do have any employees that either have lived experience or are just passionate about disability inclusion, to really try and encourage the establishment of an employer resource group, because it really does create that sense of belonging.
Yeah, so I think lived experience is absolutely key, and ask for help. Business Reform have been great with us. They're really great soundbite, and the advice line is really good. But just ask for help. Reach out to other employers. They're listed on the government website at which level. So just reach out to some within your industry and go for it.
Fantastic advice, and thank you so much to all of our panellists for being so generous in sharing their experiences and their journeys with us all today. Please give them all a round of applause. And we'll now hand it back to Alex for closing remarks and next steps.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So I'm going to bring us to a close here. And one of the things I should have mentioned at the start, and I shall now rectify, is that I am female. I'm in my mid-40s. I have short blonde hair and brown eyes, and I'm wearing a blue dress, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I love the way that through the conversation today, we've talked about doing things differently so that we can be more inclusive. And that description of ourselves is such a great reminder of thinking about things from different perspectives. I really hope that you have found today's session informative and useful and really deeply practical, actually, in thinking about how your organizations can engage with both disability and specifically with the disability confidence scheme. So as part of that, so a couple of different things. One of them is thank you, all of you, so much for joining and for being so engaged in the conversation, both the people in the room and to you joining us virtually. It's really made the conversation very rich. The next thing is that for those of you who are staying, the action continues because we have a number of experts who are here to help you on your journey. And so we know that we have Amanda here and also Julie from the Department of Work and Pensions who would love to help you sign up to the Disability Confidence Scheme. Beth is also going to stay to talk about how Patchwork Hub can help. We've got Courtney from the Business Disability Forum. Courtney, can you give us a wave? Where's Courtney? Nope. We don't have Courtney from the Business Disability. Sorry. But obviously we have Diane. We also then have the team from GAIN. We've got Johnny, Laurie, and Marilyn. And so everybody here, all of those people would love to help your organizations figure out how they can take this conversation forward. And then I want to say a couple of thank yous because this event has truly taken a village. So firstly, obviously to Tom Pursglove MP, who was such a brilliant subject matter expert for us and really brought some real depth of information there. And it's great to have somebody from government who is not only willing but keen to come and have this conversation with us. Beth for leading a great fireside chat with him as well. Thank you to Kerry, Emily, Jess, and Diane, and Devya for a super and very practical panel. Also, the huge team behind this event, led by Adriana, who is over there from the Diversity Project, my colleague Harriet Penissa here at Capital Group, and then also thanks to Marilyn, to Adam, to Miran Edern, and to Linda Russheim, all of whom are engaged with the Diversity Project. And that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg in terms of the number of people who've worked on this. And then a final thanks to my co-leads on the disability workstream, one of whom is here in person, Ashley Fagan, Tim Roberts, who is joining us virtually. So with that, that wraps up my thanks. We do have lunch. Please stay, have something to eat, have a chat, and I really hope that you continue to enjoy the conversations that we've been able to start so far today. So thank you and have a lovely rest of the day.